we begin tonight with an update on a hiker and his dog missing since mid-October. Jim Barnes went missing near Chetwynd. His truck, along with his personal belongings, were found, but there was no sign of him or his dog Murphy. And the golden retriever, now at the center of new information released by the RCMP.
A vanishing into the trees. It started like so many stories do, quiet, uneventful. A man, his dog, and the open wilderness. Jim Barnes, a seasoned paramedic and hunter, set off on what was supposed to be a final solo trip before the Canadian winter rolled in. It was October 18th, 2024. The forests near Chetwynd were familiar territory. He'd worked these lands, hunted their edges, and moved through their deep folds like a man who belonged there. This wasn't new, it was routine. The trees, the brush, the uneven paths, Jim knew them, he trusted them. But nature has a way of hiding things, and sometimes it never gives them back. When Jim didn't come home that night, it felt strange, but not alarming, not yet. The real worry crept in the next morning. He was due for his shift in Fort St. John, and Jim never missed work. Never. Then came the first clue. His phone pinged briefly, just south of Fort St. John, along a Forest Service road. That would be the last time any technology registered his existence. By noon, Michaela Sawyer and two others were scouring the area. They found his gray pickup truck parked quietly on the side of the road. The door stood ajar, and inside they found his keys, his bag, his phone, and his rifle, all untouched.
When paramedic Jim Barnes left his home in Fort St. John to go hunting on October 18th, he asked his partner Michaela Sawyer, who's also a paramedic, if she wanted to join him.
So I told him, I can't end up going. And he said, I'll take the dog.
When Barnes didn't return with the couple's 18-month-old red golden retriever named Murphy, Sawyer reported him missing.
Left as though he intended to come back any moment, but Jim never returned. An hour later, snow began to fall. Search crews mobilized quickly. Jim wasn't some amateur hiker. He was a trained outdoorsman, the kind of guy who didn't make mistakes out there, but the landscape was merciless. The terrain was thick with brush and fallen trees. The air turned colder by the hour. Tracks of wolves and grizzlies were found nearby, but nothing pointed directly to Jim. Days turned to weeks. Helicopters flew overhead when the weather allowed. Volunteers joined the search. And then, silence. Nothing. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a drop of blood. No broken branches. No trail. Jim had vanished without a trace. And so had Murphy, his 18-month-old golden retriever. Hope flickered back to life briefly. A volunteer team came across boot prints and dog tracks, frozen into the ground near a river about 3 kilometers from where the truck was found. It was something, a clue. But it didn't go far, because the trail stopped cold, the leads dried up. The forest, once wide open and familiar, had become a locked vault, and the searchers, no matter how determined, had no key.
An extensive search turned up no sign of Barnes or Murphy. But last week, someone posted this photo of an emaciated red golden retriever they found wandering 120 kilometers away from where Barnes' truck was located. Sawyer rushed over to see it.
I was like, wow, this really looks like my dog. But at the same time, this dog was battered, bruised, broken, swollen, beyond belief.
A dog returns from the dark. Then came the call from the shelter. They found a dog. Late November, over 100 kilometers away from Jim's last known location, a red-coated golden retriever was found limping, thin, and terrified, near Mile 95 Road. Michaela's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? The dog was broken, physically and emotionally. Its leg was fractured. Its coat, once shiny, was now dull, caked in mud and fear. Michaela rushed to the shelter, and when she arrived, her heart dropped. It looked like Murphy. It had the same coloring, the same structure, the same eyes, or almost the same eyes. But something was gone. The life, the joy, the spark. That dog, whoever it was, had seen something it couldn't unsee. The dog didn't bark, didn't wag, didn't jump in recognition, just stared. And the hardest part? Michaela knew Murphy. Knew her behavior, her quirks. The way she tilted her head, the sounds she made when excited, the deep need to never be left alone. And this dog had all those signs, the same odd habits, the same anxious attachment. But 98% of red golden retrievers look alike. Hope alone wouldn't be enough.
I was like, wow, like this really looks like my dog, but at the same time, this dog was battered, bruised, broken, swollen, like beyond belief. So swollen. So that was really hard. And anyone who owns a red golden retriever will know, like 98% of them, they all look the same.
At the request of the RCMP, a DNA test was performed on the golden retriever that had been found injured and alone. Michaela waited through the long, anxious weeks for the results. In the meantime, she did what she could. She fed the dog, cleaned her wounds, and tried to care for her as if she really was Murphy. She poured every ounce of hope into those long days and longer nights, nurturing the animal as though saving her could somehow pull Jim back too. But in the back of her mind, the questions wouldn't stop echoing. How could Murphy have ended up more than 120 kilometers away from the last known location? Why was the only injury a single broken leg? Where were the usual signs of an animal attack? No torn flesh, no puncture wounds, no bite marks. Just trauma, just fear. That deep, paralyzing kind of fear that lives in the eyes long after the body begins to heal. When the DNA test came back in January, the truth landed hard. It wasn't Murphy. The realization hit like a gut punch. Hope, comfort, even clarity, gone. This dog had survived her own nightmare, but she wasn't the one Michaela had been searching for. She was a stranger, a survivor, but not Murphy. And if Murphy wasn't this dog, then the question remained, where was she? Shadows in the forest. Michaela wasn't the only one left searching for answers. From the very beginning, some details made Jim's disappearance unsettling. Why had he left everything behind in his truck? His phone, his keys, even his firearm, none of it had been taken with him. Why had there been no evidence of a struggle? Then, something surfaced, something deeply unsettling. Authorities recovered footage from Jim's phone. The video showed Jim walking through the forest, alone, his camera shaky but deliberate. He kept glancing over his shoulder, his pace cautious, almost hesitant. There was tension in his body, an unease that didn't match the calm routine of a hunting trip. And then, in the background, just past the tree line, there was movement. A shape appeared shifting through the trees, and then it vanished just as quickly. It didn't lumber like a bear or stalk like a wolf. It moved with uncanny precision, slipping in and out of view like a shadow with purpose. It wasn't natural, and it was watching him. Long before the footage was found, Jim had spoken to close friends about strange sounds he'd been hearing on his trips into the woods. They weren't random or sporadic. They came at night, always the same pattern, 3 knocks, spaced just far enough apart to make your chest tighten. It was deliberate, rhythmic, almost like a signal. Jim was no stranger to the sounds of the forest. He could tell the difference between a tree shifting in the wind and something out of place. And these knocks, they didn't belong. He heard them more than once, sometimes near his campsite, sometimes deeper in the woods, always followed by silence. Not just quiet, but a kind of silence that presses in, the kind that feels wrong, like something was listening for movement, waiting. And not long after the knocks, Jim was gone. Another tale, same chill. Hundreds of miles away in the dense forests of Oregon, another man had a story that echoed Jim's. His name was Brandon Reynolds, a seasoned survivalist with years of experience in remote terrain, who reported hearing something that left him and his friend frozen in place. It wasn't a normal sound. It was a roar, deep, guttural, and loud enough to vibrate through the ground beneath their feet. It didn't sound like any predator they were familiar with. Then it stopped, and whatever made it never showed itself. Brandon recorded the audio. He uploaded it. Then, mysteriously, it vanished. It was taken down without warning or explanation. No one would acknowledge it. No one would talk about it. But the fear remained. Could this have been the same presence Jim encountered? Something that didn't belong in the natural order of things? Whatever followed Jim into the woods that day wasn't interested in chaos. It didn't leave torn clothing or blood trails. It didn't scatter his belongings or disturb the campsite. It didn't make noise unless it wanted to. It waited. It watched. It stalked him quietly, with intent. Predators usually leave destruction in their wake. But this thing left nothing. Just a man's belongings, neatly arranged in a truck, and a silence so total it seemed like the forest had swallowed him whole. And so, people began to ask the questions that had always lived on the edges of legend. It couldn't possibly be human. It isn't an animal. It was something surreal. Could it have been Bigfoot? To most, that sounds absurd. To others, especially those who've lived near these woods, hiked these trails, or heard the stories whispered over campfires, it sounds familiar. Folklore isn't always baseless. The knocking, the shape in the trees, the dog that came back, injured and mute, the crushing silence. It all connects, but no one can say how. Not yet. If a wild animal had attacked Jim Barnes, there would have been signs, scattered gear, claw marks, a torn backpack at the very least. But there was nothing, not even a trail to follow. Just an open door, as if Jim had stepped outside to investigate a sound and never came back. What kind of creature takes without leaving a trace? Before the video, before the disappearance, there had already been warnings. Jim had mentioned them to friends, odd noises in the dead of night. They weren't animal sounds, they weren't random. They were knocks, always 3, always measured, always followed by absolute silence. These were intentional, patterned, the kind of knocks that sounded more like a message than a coincidence. Every night, the knocks came closer. What was making that sound? Why did it never show itself? And perhaps most disturbing, why did it wait? Brandon Reynolds was a survivor who shared the same story as Jim. There is a believer who can vouch for him. But his story has its fair share of mysteries. The evidence was erased and the roar was unidentifiable. The only thing left behind was the fear. Would this be the fate that Jim would share if he were found? Was that roar connected to the knocking? And if so, what kind of creature knocks, stalks, and roars, yet leaves no trace? Tracks that go nowhere. One of the few physical clues in Jim's case came weeks after his disappearance. Boot prints and dog tracks were discovered frozen into the soil near a riverbank, several kilometers from where his truck had been found. It was something, a lead, a trail, but it led nowhere. The tracks stopped abruptly. No struggle, no personal items, no torn clothing or bloodstains, no suggestion that something violent had occurred. They simply ended, as though the forest had swallowed them whole. Even more frustrating, that river wasn't searched thoroughly. Search boats were never deployed. Why? Some speculated that Jim might have fallen in. Maybe he'd slipped, hit his head, and been pulled by the current. But that didn't explain the dog. It didn't explain the strange knocks. It certainly didn't explain the figure caught in the footage on his phone. Nothing about it added up. This wasn't the first time someone had disappeared like this. There have been other stories. Other people who went missing under eerie circumstances, quietly, without warning, without explanation. And in many of those accounts, just before things went wrong, there were signs. Knocking in the trees, unnatural roars echo through the night, and figures seen out of the corner of an eye standing where no person should be. It's easy to write off one case as a tragedy. It's harder to ignore a pattern, especially one that keeps repeating across different regions, different times, and different people. This isn't just a coincidence, it's something else, something terrifying, something that seems to live in the deepest parts of the forest, the places where people don't go, or when they do, they don't always come back.
Probably should be too close to it.
For most people, Bigfoot is nothing more than folklore, a blurry shape in a grainy photograph, a campfire story meant to thrill and entertain. It's a joke to some, a superstition to others. But the people who claim to have seen it, they don't laugh. Their expressions change. They go quiet, they turn pale, they avoid the woods afterward, and they don't like to talk about it again. So what if Bigfoot isn't just a myth? What if it's something older than we know, something not just surviving in the wilderness, but choosing exactly when and where it wants to be seen? And if that's true, what if it chose Jim? If you've heard the theories, then you know Bigfoot isn't always described as an animal. Some believe it's more than that, something closer to an intelligent predator. One that doesn't merely exist in the wild, but one that strategizes. It knows how to stay hidden. It doesn't leave signs unless it wants to. It doesn't roar to threaten, it roars to send you running, to test your fear. It knows how to differentiate its prey and accurately target its victims. And unfortunately, Jim was its perfectly selected prey. A question that lingers like smoke in a burned forest is why Jim? Something waited for the exact moment when he was alone, far from help, deep in unfamiliar terrain. It is despicable but also calculated. It raises questions like, what did Jim see out there before he vanished? What did he hear? His last moments couldn't have been normal. We may never know. All we have are fragments, a trail that ends at a riverbank, strange knocking sounds, a silent forest, a traumatized dog, and that last video, proof that something was there. The forests of British Columbia stretch for miles in every direction, thick with pine, fog, and secrets. They are beautiful and brutal, wild and unrelenting. They are not known for forgiveness. Jim Barnes walked into those woods with his dog and a plan. One final peaceful hunt before winter. But something was already there. And that something didn't leave behind claw marks or drag trails. It left only a mystery. Now we're left with questions. Jim's story was cut short. Murphy's fate, still uncertain. If Jim didn't enter the woods and someone else did, would they have gone missing? Was it Jim's hunter experience that excited the creature? Did it find a challenge? Whatever the truth is, it's out there. And it's still waiting. Whispers in the pines. There is something deeply unsettling about untouched places. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets. Not the kind of quiet that calms you, but the kind that builds in your chest. No sounds, no breeze, just stillness. It's as if the woods are holding their breath. However, it's easier to leave a trace on a blank canvas. So in this still forest, how did the creature leave nothing behind? Not just that Jim disappeared, but that the forest didn't react. There was no struggle, no sign of a chase, no visible goodbye. It was as though he had been erased. But nature doesn't erase people. It always leaves behind evidence, unless something more intelligent knows how to hide it. When they found Jim's truck, it looked like he had just stepped out. The driver's door was left ajar, like someone meant to return in a few minutes. But his phone was still inside. His keys, his rifle, everything was there, undisturbed. If Jim had sensed danger, he would have armed himself. He would have run, or fought. But there were no signs of panic, which leaves only two possibilities. Either he left knowing it was waiting, or he never saw it coming. Regardless of Jim's decisions, it seems like he wouldn't have made it out. The footage on Jim's phone may have been shaky, but what it revealed was clear. He wasn't alone. Someone or something was following him. Whatever it was, it moved through the trees without making a sound. It didn't snap branches. It didn't growl or snarl. It didn't announce its presence like most animals do. It simply moved, almost too smoothly. That's not how wildlife behaves. That's how something hunts. A bear would have made noise. A wolf would have circled or howled. But this thing followed Jim silently, stalking him for miles, watching, waiting, and then it stopped, because it didn't need to follow him anymore. Jim stopped filming. The perfect opportunity revealed itself, and after that, he was never seen again. Coincidence? The roar that can't be matched. Brandon Reynolds' story still lingers like a ghost behind Jim's case. He was camping deep in a ravine when he heard a roar that shook the ground and vibrated in his chest. No known animal matched it, and when he tried uploading the audio, it mysteriously vanished. The roar didn't feel random. It felt like a message, a warning. Brandon ran, Jim didn't. If what Jim encountered was Bigfoot, then it wasn't just a wild beast. It was something calculated. It left no claw marks, no tracks, no evidence, just silence. This wasn't a creature that attacked blindly. It waited, watched, and acted with precision. And when it did, no one saw it happen. That's what makes this case so terrifying. Jim Barnes is still missing. No body, no trail, no gear, just absence. Murphy, if she's still alive, is lost to the same mystery, and Michaela is left with nothing but grief and questions. She clings to what little hope remains, that maybe one day someone will find something, a thread, a clue. Some say Jim fell into the river. Others believe he was attacked by a bear. But if either theory were true, where's the struggle? Where's the trail? Baseless assumptions. What if something out there doesn't leave signs? What if it can hide in plain sight and doesn't hunt like an animal but thinks like a person? Maybe Jim crossed its path at the wrong time. Maybe Jim interrupted something he shouldn't have. Maybe he accidentally made himself a target. Maybe the knocking wasn't a warning, but a lure. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was its presence. Something was watching, waiting. Bigfoot is easy to dismiss. It's easier to say it's just a story, a shadow, a mistake. But what if it's real? What if all of it is our reality? The sightings, the knocking, the footprints that lead nowhere. What if Jim didn't just vanish? What if he was taken? Did he serve a purpose for the creature? When Michaela saw the golden retriever at the shelter, she said the eyes were different. Hollow, empty, not normal. Maybe that's what trauma does when you survive something no one can explain. Whatever she saw left her with the fear of being alone. We may never know what Jim's final moments were, but maybe it ended the same way it started, with 3 knocks. 1, 2, 3, then silence. We don't know what took Jim. We don't know what followed him or how the dog returned. The knocking, the footage, the roar. These ominous clues that this creature left behind make the whole situation more twisted. It all happened, but the forest hasn't left anything, and sometimes it never does. A hunter went into the woods only to be hunted by something much more experienced. The woods of British Columbia are still out there, silent, cold, watching. Whatever took Jim hadn't been found, and it probably won't be, because it doesn't want to be. Not yet. Not until someone else hears the knocks and steps outside to check.